As beautiful as this fire is, the only thing wrong with this picture is it's missing the people that make up my life group community. Ultimately, in a couple weeks, this whole backyard is going to be filled with people that we do life with. And we hope that you're able to get involved in a life group to be able to do some life in community. My name is Trent Jenkins, and thanks for joining us for this week's message as we continue in our series on David. Pastor Larry Osborne's got an amazing message in store for us. But before we get to that, we need to talk about life groups. Our fall quarter signups are right here, and you can get signed up today. So I got a question for you. How is it that you're planning on doing life or faith alone? Let's check this out.
In life, there are some things you're gonna need.
Hey, you're gonna need this. Oh, don't worry about it. I've already got 2 paddles right here. All right.
All right, Jimmy, we really got to get this wall painted today, and for that, you're gonna need this.
Actually, I like to think there's more than one way to paint a wall.
Okay, Picasso.
Well, looks like you're gonna need this.
Nah, I'm good. I know my car. It's a Subaru.
Okay, you're the expert.
So the Bible says we need this, but we also need this, right?
Yeah.
Well, it works for you guys. Have fun on the journey, but I want to do my own thing. See how it goes.
Join a life group today. We all need this.
Hey guys, maybe I really did need that.
Life is not meant to be done alone. That's why we do life groups. They're small groups of people, usually 10 to 16, that either meet online or in person in someone's home. And we get together and we share about life. We talk about last week's message and we dive deeper into God's Word. It's a way for us to be able to build community as well as get to know who Jesus is in a more personal way. We want to encourage you, get involved in a life group this quarter. To be able to do so, simply go to our website, northcoastchurch.com, and click on the life group banner. There you're going to be able to find a couple different options. If you're part of our online campus, meaning that you're part of our group that is out there or across the country or outside the San Diego area, simply click on the online campus button. Or if you're located in the San Diego area, you can click on Find a Group, and there you can find a group that's maybe fitting your stage of life or where you are living. Regardless, we have a group that is right for you. There's online groups, hybrid groups, or in-person groups. So let's find one for you this quarter. Now let's go ahead and get ready for today's message. Pastor Larry's got a great one. We're talking about what do we do when lies and rumors are being spread about us. I don't know if you've ever had that happen, but it is not fun. Larry's got some amazing wisdom for us. To get ready, let's go ahead and download our message notes. You can get them on our website or on our North Coast Church app. There you can also fill out your communication card, give online, or you can also put in your prayer requests. We really encourage you can always text in your prayer requests to this phone number right here on your screen as well. We're praying over those prayer requests each and every week. Now let's go ahead and join in with our worship team and prepare our hearts and minds for what it is that God has in store for us. Let's enjoy today's message.
Here in the valley, the shadow of death, darkness surrounding my soul. I lift my eyes to the mountain of God, 'cause I know where my peace comes from. We turn our eyes to you, God. We want to see your kingdom come. All earthly things have to fade here in the light it comes from you. Yeah, my joy, it comes from you. Yes, it comes from you. God, it comes from you. My peace comes from you. My hope, it comes from you. Yeah, my joy, it comes from you. Yes, it comes from you. God, it comes from you. We turn our eyes to you, God. We want to see your kingdom come. All earthly things have to fade. Feeling the light of your power and grace. It's only you. Oh, it's only you. So I shout it out. So I shout out to death. Where is your sting? 'Cause my God has defeated the grave. That resurrection power now flows through my veins. Yes, I know where my joy comes from. Yes, I know where my joy comes from. Yes, I know where my joy comes from. Our affection, our devotion poured out on the feet of Jesus. Our affection, our devotion poured out on the feet of Jesus. Our affection, our devotion poured out on the feet of Jesus. Our affection, our devotion poured out on the feet of Jesus. We love you. Oh, how we love you. You are the one our hearts adore. Jesus, Jesus, we love you. Oh, how we love you. You are the one our hearts adore.
You know, it seems like every couple of months I get the same text, email, or phone call. It's always from a pastor, a national leader, a public figure in some way who has suddenly popped up in the crosshairs of social media. And so they're finding themselves a victim of vicious slander, gossip, a campaign, if you will, by a blogger on a podcast, a local newspaper, a vindictive social media crusade, whatever it would be. And frankly, sometimes the attacks are based on reality. They're based on the past that cancel culture won't let somebody get rid of. Other times there's a seed of truth in the things that are being said, but they're greatly exaggerated. And sometimes, man, it is nothing but a bag full of lies. But it really doesn't matter. I always give the same advice, and it's rooted in the passage we're going to look at today. but it's advice that applies not only to those that are in the public eye, but it's advice that applies to any of us that ever find ourselves on the receiving end of hurtful, untruthful, exaggerated, slanderous, gossip, whatever it would be, those hurtful words that go so deeply into who we are, our person, our soul. And again, there's old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. We all know that's a bunch of baloney, don't we? They hurt very, very deeply. And when they're in print, sometimes they hurt all the more. So we're going to look at it. It's found, the passage that this advice comes from is found in 2 Samuel chapter 16, verses 5 to 14, as we continue our study through the life of David. And it's actually a passage that Pastor Chris looked at last weekend. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take another set of lens and look at this same passage through the lens of how to respond when we are on the receiving end of those kind of things. Last weekend, Pastor Chris talked to us about how David was able to have the larger perspective, a right view of God himself, and kind of change the way he responded. But I want to get very specific and very practical today. Not that last week wasn't practical, but today is like we've gone to our favorite little coffee shop after the sermon, and we said, okay, how does that apply in very, very specific ways? And I'm going to be sharing with you 5 principles that jump out to me from this passage that I have shared with public leaders for years and years, but also just one-on-one and those kind of family things where an extended family member or a loved one has done some things that are deeply hurtful. I call them the Shimei principles, and we want to look today at this passage once again. And so we started 2 Samuel chapter 16, verse 5, where David is leaving Jerusalem because Absalom has started an uprising, a coup, if you will, that's going to drive David out of Jerusalem, has driven David out of Jerusalem, and now he's on his way out. And as he's doing that, as King David approached Bahurim, verse 5 says, a man from the same clan as Saul's family. In other words, 12 tribes of Israel. He was a Benjamite, just like Saul was. He came out from there, and his name was Shimei, the son of Geher. And he cursed as he came out. And he pelted David and all the king's officials with stones, though all the troops and the special guard were on David's right and left. In other words, this was pretty much a death wish, okay? He's almost, sometimes we'll have suicide by confrontation in our culture where people just do crazy things, just begging somebody to shoot them, be it a peace officer or be it a security person or a military person, whatever. Their craziness is just basically a suicide call. And that's what, if you really understand is going on here, that's what this guy is doing, an angry death wish. And here's what he cries out. As he curses, Shimei says, get out, you murderer and you scoundrel," to David. "The Lord is repaying for you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. The Lord has given the kingdom into the hands of your son Absalom." Even though he was the same tribe as Saul, he wasn't hoping that Saul's reign would come back or some descendant would do it. He fully understood, no, it's been passed to the tribe of Judah, and David, your son Absalom, is the new king. But David, you're losing everything because of what you have done. You have come to ruin because you are a murderer. Well, as he's shouting this out, Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, says to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord and king? Let me go over and just cut off his head." But the king said, and underline this, if you don't have it from last week and underline, it's such a key phrase, it's going to show up later. What does this have to do with you? What does this have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? If he cursed because the Lord said to him, curse David, who can ask, why do you do this? And then David said to Abishai and all his officials, my son, my own flesh and blood, is trying to kill me. He's leading this coup. How much more this Benjamite? Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. We saw last weekend, we're going to see it a little more. The Lord had told David through the prophet Nathan exactly what was going to happen because of his sin in killing off Uriah after his affair with Bathsheba and then taking her as one of his wives and many other things he had done. So he says, hey, listen, the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look upon my misery and restore to me his covenant. Circle that word, his covenant. In other words, God had made a covenant, a contract, if you will, with David about your household is going to be blessed and you are going to reign and your children are going to reign. And he says, you know what? It seems like right now, part of that covenant has been torn apart. But what I don't want to do is take things into my own hands. And perhaps the Lord actually is doing things different than I'm able to see at this moment. And he will restore the covenant blessing instead of the curse that I am receiving today. So David and his men continued along the road while Shimei was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went, throwing stones at him and showering him with dirt. And the king and all his people with him arrived at their destination, which was about a day's journey away, exhausted. And there he refreshed himself. Here's something I want you to note that's going to be important as we flesh this out and what it means and how we live out these principles. Shimei cursed all along during most of that day's journey, but somewhere towards the end of it, he ran out of steam. And David hadn't had to kill him to make him run out of steam. David just ignored it and went on. And when he got to the place where they arrived, Shimei was gone. And he and the people with him were able to refresh themselves. Instead of constantly living now in more bloodshed, more getting even, more taking things into his own hands. Now, in the rest of the story, it's kind of interesting. Spoiler alert, what we see later on, that when David is restored back to the king, the same Shimei guy goes, uh-oh, and he runs out to meet David as David is coming back in Jerusalem, and he bows down and he begs for forgiveness and apology. And David personally looks around and says, this is a day for celebration. I'm being restored as king. Let's not make this a day for revenge. And he personally returns good for evil to Shimei, and he temporarily pardons him as he's restored to being king. But then the rest of the stories, you jump down to 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 8 to 10, another account in our Bible of David's life. And we find out as he is on his deathbed and Solomon is going to be king, he turns to Solomon and he says this, it's time for justice. I'm not going to get my own revenge. I've given this guy incredible grace and mercy for a period of time. But Solomon, don't let his gray head go down to the grave. And justice is given to Shimei. And there's a picture there in the biblical sense of returning good for evil, because returning good for evil doesn't mean people get away with what they do. It just means we leave justice into God's hands rather than speeding it up and taking it into ours. But let's move on now. Let's look at what I'm calling the Shimei principles, how to respond when words hurt. And there's 5 principles, like I mentioned earlier, that we're going to look at today. And the first 2 are really pretty simple. They're well known. They apply to all of us. I'm going to mention them, though, because they're foundational. They're like if you build a house without building the foundation first, that house is going to tip over at the very first storm. And so we're going to look very briefly at these first 2, even though you'll kind of go probably, well, I know that, because my question is, okay, you know it. Are you living it? So we'll take a few moments on 2 well-known principles. The third one applies to any of you who are in the public eye. And I don't mean you're a national political figure or a nationally known pastor. No, I mean you're a principal of a school. You own a business. You're in a C-suite office of a company. You're in a position where when people go after you, it becomes public, because your role is part of a public role. And what do you do when you're attacked in the media by bloggers, podcasts, letters to the editor? There is a response that's very, very important, and it's very counterintuitive. And then the last 2 principles apply to all of us. You might think you're kind of living in the shadows. Nobody knows really what I'm doing or whatever. But those 2 principles apply because no matter who you are, if we deal with people, they're going to be very hurtful words. And they might not be in a local newspaper, a letter to the editors. They might not be by a blogger or a podcast or a social media crusade, but they hurt just as deeply. It kind of reminds me, one time somebody was talking to me about emotional pain and understanding that it doesn't do a whole lot of good if, somebody has a problem and then you come along and you say, yeah, but look at somebody else who has a bigger problem. Like you lose one arm and you say, well, this person lost both arms. No, because here's how life emotionally works. It's like the fire alarm going off in your kitchen. Whether the toast is burning or the whole kitchen is aflame, that thing makes the same piercing noise and goes off the same way. And that's a lot of times how our emotions are. And that's how it can be like, somebody comes along, well, it's just a family thing. Well, that family thing can hurt just as much as a national thing. And so the last two principles are going to deal with our friendship circle, coworkers, family members. You're part of a PTA, you're coaching a soccer team, whatever it would be. But you ready? Let's dig in and let's look at these 5 Shimei principles that they pay such great dividends in my own life. And I've over and over have tried to coach people I have the privilege of working with when they find themselves in these crosshairs. And they've also paid a great reward in their life when they've been willing to follow these. So the first one is simply this: don't be surprised. When you're on the receiving end of unfair, unkind, gossip, slander, or hurtful words, don't be surprised. It's part of life in this fallen world. And if you and I are Jesus followers, for us to assume that when Jesus and all the apostles were slandered for their righteousness, that things like that won't hit us. That we won't be slandered at times for our righteousness, at times for doing the right things, and at times, frankly, just because somebody doesn't like us. It's not even a spiritual issue. It's part of life. Jesus said this: if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. Remember what I told you, a servant isn't greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you also. Frankly, Satan has you and I right where he wants us if he can get us to believe that living a righteous, obedient life means everybody's going to love us. It doesn't. It never has. It never will. So the first thing, don't go, where are you, God? God, this following you hasn't done any good. Don't be surprised. It's part of living in this fallen world. Righteous or ungodly, we're all going to experience it. The second principle is this: look when you and I are attacked unfairly. Look for the seeds of truth. Chris kind of really focused in on David's response last weekend being that. He knew that what Shimei was saying was really true. He had murdered people. He had done what the things that this guy was calling out for. And David's response was to accept that. He'd done everything he was accused of, and he was experiencing the consequences that God had told him in a general terms through the prophet Nathan were going to happen to him. Now, a number of messages ago, I did a look at 2 Samuel chapter 12, and I titled it, How the Fallen Rise Again. And a couple of the principles we looked at in that message was that David was able to rise again because he accepted the immediate consequences of what he had done when God dealt them. But also I pointed out that we were going to see through the rest of his life the long-term lingering consequences of his sin. When they bit him, he was going to accept that, then go, well, God, it should be all over right now. And it was his ability to understand what he had brought on himself, not to enjoy it, not to love it, but to take responsibility for that. Those were two of the things that helped him be a guy that every time he failed was able to get up and rise again. He refused to get angry at God for consequences that he had brought upon himself. And that's what he's doing right here. Listen carefully to this. When people gossip or attack me for the things that I have done, the starting point of my response needs to be not, well, that was long ago. It needs to be this: I'm the one who provided them with their content. Oh, maybe in a cancel culture it's unfair. They're not letting me move on from being Paul the blasphemer, the persecutor, and the murderer to Paul the apostle. They just want, well, that's true, but guess what? I did those things. And our enemies can be some of our best friends in terms of spiritual growth if we will focus on the seed of truth first before we look at the huge bushel and basketful of untruth that is part of their accusations. Now, those are the first two. They're well known, but they're so easily forgotten. And we got to start with them. But number three, for any of you that are in the public eye where those kind of attacks, those hurtful words are more than just said in the hallway or at a meeting, but they somehow make their way to a larger public forum, remember this principle. Never dialogue with a fool and never wrestle with a pig. Never, highlight that on your note sheet. Never dialogue with a fool and never wrestle with a pig. It's such an important principle, and it is so counterintuitive because we always want to answer back. But here's the truth. If you wrestle with a pig, you're both going to get muddy and the pig's going to love it. And so you just don't go there. So let me walk you through any of you that ever are on the receiving end because of your role, and to know those of you who are in public roles or you're leaders of an organization and that organization suddenly is in the public eye. How do you respond? Well, it's very counterintuitive, but here's what you do. You don't respond. You don't respond. Now, you're going to have this sense like, yeah, but this untruth or this exaggeration or I'm now this and they're accusing me of that. Everything in you, if you're a leader of an organization or you're personally the victim of it, everything in you is going to want to put some water on that fire and put it out. But here's what you need to know. It's a grease fire. And when you put water on a grease fire, all you do is spread the problem. It never puts out the fire. I always like to tell people this when they go, oh, what do I do? What do I do? I say this. The news cycle is your friend. The news cycle is your friend. If you respond, there's more that they can say tomorrow. If you don't respond, they'll say something tomorrow and the next day, and after a while, because there is no wood added to the fire goes out. That's what happens. But what we do is we let tens become thousands in our mind. You know, whatever group reads it or wherever it is, we go, oh man, everybody's seeing it. No, not everybody's seeing it. A small group of people are seeing it. And especially if it's posted somewhere or publicly somewhere where somebody has an agenda, either to the right or the left politically or pro-Christian or anti-Christian or anti-big church, or, whatever it would be. There's a small group of people who are already cynical and have their mind made up. They're the ones going to that blog. They're the ones listening to that podcast. They're the ones reading that article because they're predisposed to it. And nobody else is. So why in the world are you going to call it to everybody else's attention so that they end up going there? Let me give you a couple of real life examples that happened here at North Coast Church and one to me. When we were building our Vista campus, there was, as there almost always is when you build something big, it's called NIMBY, not in my backyard. Everybody wants a little growth, but not in my backyard. And so we were actually building, as many of you know, a very beautiful campus that hasn't created congestion issues for the neighborhood or whatever. But before it was built, there were some people that stirred that up. That was going to be bigger than Petco Stadium, and which by its footprint actually maybe is in the 40 acres, but not in the crowd or the traffic. There was even before a council meeting, there was an engineer who'd figured it out. Every car 2 feet apart after a service was going to make a 2-hour log jam there, and emergency vehicles wouldn't even be able to get through. Now, that's not true. It takes 7 minutes to get out of the parking lot, and sometimes you're at a signal for a couple of minutes, and that's it. But again, that was a reality for folks. So there was all kinds of letters to the editor that were in the newspaper, and I'd always get somebody coming to me and saying, what are we going to do? Because many of the things that were letters to the editor were slanderous. I mean, some of them were racist in their statements about the church, and people go, we got to answer that. And I always had the same thing. Nobody's reading it. You read it maybe 1,000 other people in this whole extended community read it. But if we answer it, guess what? There's going to be another one tomorrow. Just let it go. The news cycle is our friend. It was the Shimei principle. Shout down whatever you want. If there's truth to it, we're going to bear with it. And if there's not truth with it, time will tell and truth will come out. It's interesting that some of the people that were actually leaders in the crusade against us building it, some of you actually go to North Coast now. And Chris Brown and I have had a lot of people come up and go, man, this thing is so different than I thought. I'm so glad we didn't engage in a fight and a battle to make enemies. You just let it go. I personally had one. There's a couple of bloggers out there that don't like large church pastors. And a number of years ago, there was a headline in one of the larger ones that said, what is the EFCA? That's called the Evangelical Free Church of America. It's a tribe of churches we are connected with. It said, what are they going to do with their Larry Osborne problem? And the president of our tribe denomination called and said, have you seen it? I said, no, but somebody just pointed it out to me, I guess. What is it? He told me what it is. And then his answer was, what are we going to do? And here's what I told him. Nothing. Because if I'm a problem, it'll get bigger and bigger. And if I'm not a problem, if we try to answer it, we send out to people at North Coast Church, or we send out something to denomination, guess what everybody's going to do? They're going to go read the article that was blasting me with full of untrue things and exaggerations. And that person's going to go, the blogger, this particular blogger is going to go, wow, that was a success. And they're going to do another one because got a lot of clicks. So again, if you're part of a company, you own a restaurant, a business, you see, this is really any of you who get this kind of stuff, a bad Yelp review for your business. You so want to respond. Don't. Let it go. If you got a short little response within Yelp in the business thing, say your little piece, but do understand this. Don't let the tens become thousands. When I'm going to go out, and I'm sure many of you are the same thing, to a restaurant or looking up a hotel or whatever, there's always some really bad reviews in that thing, aren't there? But if there's a whole bunch of really good reviews and two really bad reviews, I just think there's some grouchy people that had time on their hands. And I don't judge it by the worst, I judge it by the most. And it's best to just let it go. And a part of this principle is simply this. Write this down on your note sheet. If you can't win, don't play the game. If you can't win, don't play the game. I want you to see how Proverbs picks up the Shimei principle and applies it to those kind of accusations. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, or he will be wise in his own eyes. So here you got do not answer, and here you have answer. So which is it? Well, the Bible's full of contradictions. No. When Proverbs was put together, he was very aware of what he said in the first verse and what he was saying in the next verse. And the whole idea of this is you can't win. So if you ignore them, they're going to keep going after you. If you answer them, they're going to keep going after you. So the whole idea of this passage is you and I can't win. Now, on your note sheet, there's a couple of other verses about this to amplify what we've got up here on the screen. Proverbs 18:2 puts it this way, fools find no pleasure in understanding. They delight in airing their own opinions. So that's why you don't answer, because there's no delight when you're dealing with somebody that's already predisposed. There's no delight in the truth. What they want to just is reveal their opinions. And if you answer, you just can't win. Here's another verse on this. Proverbs 9:7-8, also on your note sheet. Whoever corrects a mocker invites insult. You got a mocker, you got a crazy person, you're wrestling with a pig. And he says, don't do it. You're just begging to be an insult. Whoever rebukes the wicked incurs abuse. They don't win the argument, they just get more abuse. Do not rebuke mockers, or they will hate you. Frustrate them. drive them crazy with your silence. Take the Shimei principle that David applied and let it go. And eventually, before the day's out, Shimei runs out of gas. Now, I said principles number 4 and 5 apply to all of us, even if you're never going to be in a public eye in your role or things that would be said about you. So here's number 4. If it's not your battle, stay out of it. If it's not your battle, stay out of it. Now listen carefully to this. If it's not your battle, stay out of it. Because we live in a culture where all of us, and as Jesus followers, we're caught in that culture. We sometimes don't even realize it. We live in a culture where everyone is quick to take offense for someone else. Have you noticed that? That whatever is said, somebody's going to come up and go, oh, well, that's offensive too. Is it offensive to you? No, but it's offensive to fill in the blank. We all are living in a day and age where we think it's our job to go and enter into battles that aren't our battles. I had you underline Shimei. He wanted to jump in and kill, Abishai, when he wanted to jump in and kill Shimei in verses 9 and 10. And I had you underline this phrase. What does this have to do with you? Here's what Proverbs says about you and I deciding to jump into something, to kind of virtue signal or whatever it is we're doing as we spread the flame of anger and angst, or just a slander and gossip of what somebody did because we think we're helping. Here's what Scripture actually says. That I am like one who grabs a stray dog by the ears. Like one who grabs a stray dog by the ears is someone who rushes into a quarrel, not their own. Don't do it. I want to remind you, back then, they didn't have domestic dogs as pets like we do. And that's why the Hebrew, it's translated in Hebrew, it's literally just dog. But for our modern day, it'd be like a stray dog. So you just see a wild dog out there, a coyote, and you decide to go over and pick it up by its ears. Y'all understand that's not going to be a good day, right? And what he's saying, that anytime I decide I'm going to jump in because I'm going to be part of a quarrel that is not mine, whether I physically jump into that quarrel or I do it on social media, I do it with a retweet, I do it by just taking someone else's offense on myself and just internally being angry, and I don't do anything. Then what I've done is a very foolish thing. And I haven't helped the cause, but I've 100% hurt myself. You see, as Jesus followers, we have been called to be peacemakers, not arsonists. We have been called to be peacemakers in a world filled with arsonists. Here's what Jesus says. Blessed are the ones who make peace. Why? We will be called the children of God. So when there's conflict, if we step in and instead of taking sides and fanning the flames, we bring peace, we're going to be called the children of God. I want you to see in Proverbs 29:8 what it says. Mockers stir up a city, but the wise turn away anger. Okay? We don't add fuel to the flame. What we do, if we are wise, is we actually turn away anger. I was thinking about this as I was putting this message together. An awful lot of retweets wouldn't be retweeted if we followed this principle. Would you agree? One of the reasons I'm off social media is how many times I saw on Facebook or Instagram or other forms of social media that I was on is I would see people passing on bad news, a negative story, or just becoming really angry about something they weren't even involved in. So here, before you do the retweet or any form of it, here's something to ask yourself. What is my purpose for passing this on? I wonder what would happen if every time before we went, hey, have you seen this? However we pass it on, we ask ourselves this question. What is my purpose? Am I trying to virtue signal, let everybody know I'm on the right side, which is a very, very powerful way of paying nothing for your, quote, courage? Am I venting my anger? See, that was always my greatest temptation. I'd just be angry about it. How could this happen? How could somebody have done that? And pop it on to everybody who was a follower. Or, even worse, am I passing it on because it's a juicy tidbit? It's a slanderous, harsh piece about somebody I don't really like. And here's one more bit of information you want to know. Blessed are the peacemakers. If it's not my battle, I decided decades ago I'm not going to enter it. And why did I decide that? Because of the Shimei principle, because of the verses we just saw in Proverbs. Now, there's another one that applies to all of us. Don't take up a fight that's not our own. But number 5, I plead with you, I implore you, don't let a great friendship be ruined by a few hurtful words. It is so common. All my life I've seen this. Great friendships, family relationships, just utterly destroyed and broken because of unwise, unkind, and hurtful things that somebody said. You might write this phrase down. There's going to be a number of them under this one. I really want to camp on it for a few minutes. Thin skin has wrecked a lot of great relationships. Thin skin has wrecked a lot of great relationships. And I decided long ago, not long after Nance and I were married, so I would have been in my 20s, that I was, because I'd watched it in too many things. Nance and I decided we are not going to let a few unkind, careless words destroy a relationship. And why? Because as we're going to see in just a few moments, I've said some unkind, careless words that I really didn't mean as they could have been taken out of context. Now, this is not easy to do. I will admit that. But it's the Shimei principle applied right down to day in and day out. Like, let it go. And I've got a series of verses and statements that I hope will help you, because I know right now that there's a good number, a large number that are watching and listening to this. And you are totally estranged from a past friend, a neighbor, a family member, sometimes even nuclear family member, because of a few careless words or deeply hurtful, unkind words, and you decided you were going to teach them a lesson, or your skin was so thin you couldn't handle it, and you lost something that was beautiful over something that was passing. Understand this about people. The one who repeats what others say about you is not your friend. The one who comes up, hey, did you know Aunt so-and-so? Did you know your brother? Did you know your sister? Did you know this person? Did you know the one over in this department? Hey, do you know what they said about you? The one who brings that to you, we have a natural sense of going, oh, thank you. I'm so glad now I know that. Listen, they are not your friend. They're bringing poison to your soul, not good to your life. Let's see what Scripture says. A perverse person stirs up conflict, and a gossip separates close friends. They are not your friend. Here's what Bible says they are. They're perverse. That's a pretty strong word. The next time somebody comes up to you and go, hey, did you know? And they're passing that on. Go back to that passage. Realize what they are. You know, Satan is called, we're told this about Satan, that he comes as an angel of light and his messengers of light. And that's what they are. They're doing the devil's work in your life. And you and I sometimes are going, thank you, and then taking our marching orders from them. A perverse person does it. And they're called a gossip. Neither of those are two things that I want to be a part of, or the kind of people that I want to hang around. Now, everybody's done that once or twice. But I'm going to tell you, when you find a pattern of that, and even in the immediate once or twice, man, realize what it is. It's a poison to the relationship. Now write this phrase down. Don't seek out what others say about you, and don't dwell on what they say about you. So we're going to see a couple of verses here. Don't seek out and don't dwell on. So sometimes it's because we're running around trying to find out, hey, what'd they say, what'd they do? We're doing a little search on the internet, whatever it would. Why? Like Chris Brown and I are public figures. We're both off social media because of these kind of reasons. And I have never had Google alerts so I could find out every time my name is mentioned for good or bad in some article or blog or whatever it would be. Why? I don't want to know. And I fairly often have somebody come up, I'd say, probably every couple of months, hey, did you know, whatever it would be? And sometimes it's really good. I go, thank you. Sometimes it's really bad. And there's a time and a place to go, thank you. If it's not separating friends, it's kind of a tack blog or whatever it is. But you know what? I never go back and wow, I'm glad you know that. I never go back and read it. Why? Because it does me no good. I don't want to seek out what others say about me. And then once I know, I don't want to dwell on it. It's not doing me any good. If it's an enemy, let them go. Why am I letting them live rent-free in my brain? And if it's a friend, why am I letting that friendship, because of a few careless words, be destroyed? So let's pop a verse up here and take a look at it. I love this passage. If you hang around me in leadership sort of things, you'll hear me say it all the time. Ecclesiastes 7, 21, 22. Don't pay attention to every word people say, or you may hear your servant cursing you. And why do you not want to do that? Because you know in your heart that many times you yourself have cursed others. Nancy and I like design. We go to somebody's house and we'll be driving home sometimes and we'll go, man, that was so cool. I love the way they did that. I would have never thought of doing this and whatever it would be. And to be honest, once in a while we'll go home and go, man, that was kind of weird in our mind. I don't think I'd ever do that. Well, the sad thing, if somebody was recording that comment and sent it back to you, you would think we were like negative on it. No, we were making an observation about a design thing. Like, you like sushi, I don't like sushi. You like cheese on your burger, I don't like cheese. It's a conversation. But when somebody comes and brings it back to you, those little negative things can become so personal. Or maybe they're totally careless words and they are actually attacking you. Are you going to destroy a family relationship? Are you going to destroy a great friendship because you're listening to every word that people say and forgetting that whatever it is you're upset about, there is a parallel in your life and your history and my history where we have done exactly the same thing? Kind of adding to this, Proverbs takes this last phrase and puts it this way. Who can say I've kept my heart pure? I am clean and without sin. We've all done it. We've all been there. We all have the t-shirt to prove it. So let's live like it in our relationships with other people. Now, another one I'd like you to write down is this. It's been so helpful to me in the hurtful kind of conversation in the hallway sort of things where somebody comes back and says, did you know? It's not a sign of weakness to let things go. It's a sign of strength and security. Our culture thinks that David's response to Shimei is weakness. And Scripture says, man, we live in an upside down world where everybody has taken all the price tags and changed them in the store overnight. Because it's a sign of strength and security. Give you a couple of verses on this. A person's wisdom yields patience. It's not my weakness that causes me when I'm waiting in a line or whatever to try to do the best I can to let it go. It's my wisdom that allows me to wait. And when I get impatient and I take things personally, it's because I'm lacking wisdom. And catch this, I love it. It's to one's glory and praise to overlook an offense. I've often told you the story, an analogy I like to use, of when I'm waiting in a line for something and a little kid kind of butts in front of me. I just roll my eyes. I don't deck the kid because it's like he's a little kid. I'm a grown man. But when somebody that's 35 or 45 pushes me out of the way, then everything bears up. Why? It's my insecurity. I'm not insecure in the sight of the little kid. Another grown man who acts like, hey, who are you? Then everything rails up. Well, it's my glory to overlook it. Second verse, let's put it up. Proverbs 20, verse 3. It's to one's honor to avoid strife, but every fool is quick to quarrel. We all know the tragic stories of road rage, right? You hear them where somebody just goes off and one person responds one way, another person spends a long time of the rest of their life in jail. Why? Because they weren't going to let somebody cut them off, or they weren't going to let somebody flip them off, or whatever it would be. And it's like, I'm going to teach you a lesson. No, it's actually honor to avoid strife when someone does that. It is not to my honor to tailgate you the rest of the way, stare you down. It just shows I'm a little boy at heart. I'm still in junior high. The fool is the one who's quick to say, I'll teach you a lesson. Now, folks, I'm not saying the Shimei principle is easy to apply. I'm not saying that words don't hurt. They hurt deeply. I am saying this. I have a choice of what I'm going to do with them. I'm going to bring it to the Lord and say, Lord, help me to remember every time I have said an unkind or a misunderstood thing about someone else, and help me to see these words through that lens. Or am I going to choose to dwell on them? Let enemies live rent-free in my brain, and let formerly close relationships all be destroyed because in a moment of thoughtlessness or carelessness, somebody said something very mean, very unkind, and they meant it. So what? Why trade a great thing for the poison of dwelling on it? I'm not saying there's not a time and a place to confront. Man, you're in a marriage that's verbally abusive. Yeah, you got to speak up to that. That's not what this message is about. This message is about the stuff that's out there. It's the Shimeis in our life. There's a better way to respond. A grease fire in the kitchen is a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's a horrible thing. But don't put water on it. Let it go. Let God deal with situations. The news cycle is your friend if you're a public person. And a few careless words should never destroy a family or a friendship if you're a public or a private person. Man, there's a ton there. And I want to tell you, it has done so much good in my life. Personally, sleeping well, living at peace, to learn the lesson of Shimei. I hope you learn it too. Father, would you take the things that we've looked at, and would you help us to have the ability to take this message, these lessons from David's response, and apply them when everything in us every now and then goes, yeah, but this one is different. Help us to understand and to see through the power of your Spirit that it's not different. And that you said, print it to this story, that we might learn how to respond. In the name of Jesus, amen.
That was a powerful message today that Larry just delivered, and some of you are dealing with exactly what he was just talking about. We want to be able to pray for you and over you. Whether it's that situation or another situation that's happening in life, we've got prayer partners and myself that are praying over those requests each and every week. All of them are kept confidential. We're not sharing them with other people, but we want to be able to pray over you. Simply text that prayer request into this phone number right here on your screen, and we'll be getting back to you, acknowledging your prayer request this week. Well, thank you for joining us, and we want to encourage you, get signed up for a life group. Don't delay. You don't want to end up not getting the group that you would want to have. So get online today. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.